Welcome back to the Kevin O'Connor Show. Joining me today, Jason Timpf. Jason, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. I can't complain. I'm so ready for the NBA to heat up. I can sense it. The playoff football has been spectacular, but it also is the omen of the times. It tells us that the NBA is getting ready to kick it into high gear.
Absolutely true. Football has been absolutely unbelievable. We'll have Justin Boone from Yahoo Sports way later in the show, but we get a lot of basketball to talk about, despite things being a little bit of a lull as of late in the NBA, Jason. There's still a lot going on. We have the trade deadline in a few weeks, a lot of unhappy fan bases, a lot of interesting stuff happening. So I want to start off with you here, Jason. Where do you want to begin? I have three categories of topics for us. Unhappy fans, these fan bases that seem very disgruntled with their teams right now. We'll talk about them. Or hot stove questions, talk about some stuff around the trade deadline, or random thoughts. Where do you want to start with? Unhappy fans, hot stove questions, or random thoughts?
Let's get negative. Let's go with unhappy fans.
Okay, let's start off with unhappy fans. Knicks fans, they're turning on Karl Anthony Towns. Over last week, Karl Anthony Towns got ripped apart by Knicks fans, Jason, for a play that happened where he drove to the basket, slipped as he was getting up from the floor, and didn't get quite back onto the other end, didn't hustle back, and Knicks fans ripped into him for it. I think the replay itself didn't look quite as bad as it seemed like from the broadcast angle, but still, it did exemplify the lack of effort you often see from Karl Anthony Towns. Do you think the criticism of Cat is fair?
You know, I do, but less so for that specific clip to the point that you're trying to make. Like, I think you can find various examples of that kind of lapse in effort from stars this time of year quite a bit. One of the things that I think is really funny about the NBA is like you have these teams that come out and they look great to start the season. And then inevitably you get into that December, January stretch, and it's just that's where the 82 game grind really starts to wear on you, and some lapses in focus and intensity can start to come up. And then there are usually these teams that get off to disappointing starts, and they end up getting into December and January, and they're desperately trying to save their season, and so they can play some of the best basketball that they play all season. Look at Golden State and the Clippers, for example. But like what I look at with the Knicks is they're just a textbook example of a team that I thought got off to an excellent start this season, like a really, really great start. And as a team, they've started to just kind of lose a little bit of that defensive intensity and focus on a possession-to-possession basis. And so with Cat in particular, he kind of is what he is to me. I'm more concerned about his mistake making than him necessarily playing hard in a big moment. So for instance, like he's just had a couple of these mistakes this year that fall in line with the rest of his career, where in a big spot late in a game, he'll make an execution error. Like there was a game against the Celtics where he chased Jordan Walsh off of a corner three when Jordan had only made 3 corner threes all season to that point. And he drove past him and got a layup. It was a huge blow to the Knicks in that game. Or in the Spurs game where he stops paying attention to Luke Cornett crashing out of the corner and gives up an and one offensive rebound that ends up basically costing them that game. There are a lot of examples of that, like that in the postseason in the past, where he'll make a critical execution error defensively in a big spot. That I think is a bigger picture issue with the Knicks that isn't going away. This recent stretch to me is more they have to play super hard to cover for Cat and Brunson anyway. And so when they relax, their defense just falls off of a cliff. And that's more or less what we've been seeing over the last month.
Well, and I think you're hitting on the source of the frustration with the Knicks. When it came to that play, it was just one of many moments, and it wasn't even the most significant one of all, the one that was most detrimental to the team. And I think when you look at the player himself and then you factor in his salary, the money that he's making, Karl Anthony Towns this year is making $53.1 million, goes up to $57 million next year, then $61 million in the final year of his deal in 27-28 as a player option for that deal. And so when you consider Karl Anthony Towns is making max player money, but he is not a leading scorer, he is not an anchor of your defense, he's just really one of the guys on your team making max player money. You tie that all together for Knicks fans, that's where it's like, geez, we've been teased with the idea of trading this guy for Giannis. we didn't even have to make this trade for Karl Anthony Towns. Looking at what Julius Randle is doing in Minnesota, as frustrating as he was, this guy is even worse. And so for Knicks fans, I think, understandably so, you're pointing fingers in certain directions. Karl Anthony Towns is definitely the most easily improvable spot if you can turn him into something. What is the fix for the Knicks, Jason? Is the fix possible with Cat, or is it only something that can happen without Karl Anthony Towns for them to actually take the next step in the postseason?
This is where it's just about being realistic about what Cat's trade value is. I don't see any universe where you can turn him into something that tangibly improves the team. And so ultimately, what you have to look at is there have been stretches with Cat where it looked good. Specifically, you look at the Celtics series last year. I thought last year was mostly full of disappointments for the Knicks. I thought they underachieved in the regular season. They really struggled against the best teams in the league. They didn't exactly dominate Detroit, and then they completely decomposed against Indiana. But there was this ceiling that we saw in the Celtics series where the wings were able to do enough to cover for Brunson and Cat defensively. And then we've seen that for large chunks of the start of this season as well. And so there is a ceiling there that's worth trying to pursue, but I don't see any universe where they can get off of Cat and improve the team. So the best thing they can do is attempt to rectify things in-house with what they've got. I mean, unless you've heard something in terms of an option for them to flip Cat, I haven't seen anything that makes sense that another team would be interested in terms of taking Cat on with the amount of money remaining on his deal.
No, I don't think there's anything midseason. I think for the Knicks, if it's something involving Karl Anthony Towns, it's waiting for the summer and praying that Giannis Antetokounmpo, with at that time only 1 year remaining on his contract, forces his way to you. And in that case, the Knicks would have another tradable first available, because then 2033 first would be available. They'd have the ability to flip Cat to another team and get some assets back. I don't think it'd be anything until the summer involving Karl Anthony Towns. I think in the meantime for the Knicks, if they can get back to playing with more motion and movement on offense, and then also playing with two bigs, Cat just quite simply is not a five. He needs to play the four. He needs to play more often next to Mitchell Robinson and Ariel Hekporti. I think that's the key for the Knicks with the hand they've been dealt. You just can't play with Cat at the five as often as they have. I thought early in the season, Jason, it seemed like Mike Brown was going to use two bigs a lot more often, and he has in spurts when Josh Hart's been out. But I think he doesn't have a choice. I think if you're Mike Brown, you have to go to two bigs more often with Karl Anthony Towns.
Do you think he's been leaning into that more as an attempt to continue to drive that kind of drive and kick mentality for the Knicks on offense that's been generating for them so many more catch and shoot threes? I think, like, even though I agree with you in principle and the idea, I think that's been the thought process. Is I think Mike's been indexing more towards ball handling. One of the subtle strengths of this Knicks team is they have a lot of good ball handlers. Even when you dig into their bench and you look at Jordan Clarkson and you look at Deuce McBride and you look at Tyler Kolek, they've just got a lot of dudes who can put the ball on the floor. And I think he's been leaning into that space and dribble penetration to generate quality threes. But ultimately, to your point, they can't guard well enough with Cat at the five. And so I think trying to strike that balance more would certainly go a long way.
Yeah, I do think that's certainly an element of it, and Josh Hart is critical in that as well. And if Josh Hart is not knocking down a ton of shots, if he's not getting the respect of the defense, it's very hard to then play Mitchell Robinson or Hekporti out there as a second big. But that's ultimately what I think the Knicks at least have to experiment with more often moving forward in the season. And hope to God, Karl Anthony Towns, you get the good version of him come postseason time. Another unhappy fan base, Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks over the weekend, they gave up 82 points to the Celtics in the first half of a game. They gave up 132 in the game a couple days after they gave up 141 points to the Lakers. They're 3-3 since the trade, Jason. Trae Young, he was supposed to be the issue on defense. The Hawks were a little bit better earlier on in the season, but the defense has stunk. The offense has collapsed with CJ McCollum. They've been bottom 5 in the NBA with a 110 offensive rating ever since the trade. Is this just a coaching issue for Atlanta with Quinn Snyder? Is that really the number one issue with the Hawks right now?
Whoever you want to blame for the defense, I'm so glad you brought up the Trae Young piece of this, because that was frustrating for me when I was seeing, you can't argue with the on-off win-loss numbers, like they were kind of ridiculous, but when I would watch them play with Trae Young, the team would not be playing defense. And I'd be like, I can't look at this in good faith and say this is all Trae Young's fault. I think there are some good defenders on this team. Obviously, we know what Dyson Daniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker can do at the guard position. There have been moments where I see Onyeka Okongwu and Mohamed Gay kind of helping for each other on both ends of the floor, helping in screening actions and covering for each other as low men, where they kind of just cover a lot of ground and they look really imposing defensively. But their forwards are just so bad defensively. They're so bad. And that ultimately has been why this team has been so disappointing. This on paper was supposed to be this combination of athletic, versatile talent that just hasn't amounted to enough defensively on the perimeter. And, specifically, I thought in that Celtics game, and I'm sure this stood out to you, the level of comfort with which the Celtics ball handlers were operating with, their ball pressure was absolutely terrible in that game. And so it just felt like Derek White or Jaylen Brown or whoever it was that was dribbling on the ball, Anthony Simons as well, was able to just kind of comfortably get into their bag and settle into whatever pull-up jump shot they wanted, because they weren't getting up into the ball initially. They weren't pursuing over screens and making people uncomfortable. They were basically just in the right spot without any ball pressure on defense, and it was allowing the Celtics to just settle into easy shots. And they ended up hitting 15 pull-up jump shots in the game at 1.26 points per attempt. I just thought they allowed Boston to get way too comfortable. And ultimately, when Atlanta's at their best, they are in the ball. And I know Dyson Daniels didn't play in that game, but they're usually in the ball. They're forcing you to be uncomfortable. They're usually always pressuring that high post entry and forcing turnovers in horn sets around the top of the key. And then they get out and run, and they get out and run. And we've seen the Hawks do that and be good, but just nowhere near often enough to actually kind of materialize into consistent success. And I kind of point my finger to us jumping the gun a little bit on this team in terms of their perimeter talent, as still being a few years away from actually becoming refined two-way players.
Shouldn't they be better, though? I mean, look, Jalen Johnson is getting a lot of hype as a most, yeah, definitely. But Jalen Johnson's getting hype as a most improved player because of his leap on offense, and rightfully so. But he has regressed so significantly on the defensive end of the floor. And you look at the names on the paper, it's Jalen Johnson and Zachary Risachet and Dyson Daniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and then Okongwu and Mo Gay, as the fives. And they should be way better defensively than they are. They should be. They just should be. This should be on paper this is a top 10 defense, maybe even a top 5 defense, but they're nowhere close to that. And I think that's where, for Hawks fans, it's well, is it the personnel? Is it the coaching? What do we do here? We traded Trae Young. We got expiring contracts, CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert, for the face of our franchise. This is it, and nothing's changed. We still are going to be in the play-in. Understandably so. I mean, really, they're in the worst place. They're stuck in the middle, and that's the worst place to be in the NBA. The only real silver lining for the Hawks is the fact that they could get the number 1 pick in the draft without even their own first-round pick, because they get the rights to the Pelicans or Bucks pick, whatever is better, thanks to their magnificent trade they made on draft night last year, trading down 10 spots with New Orleans. That's the real only silver lining, the light at the end of the tunnel for this current roster, is if they can get another superstar to add to this team that does have something there. And to your last point, Jason, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it was just a little too soon to expect a Jalen Johnson to be this guy on offense and also sustain energy on defense. Maybe it's a little too soon to expect Risachet to be a consistently impactful player on the floor. Maybe it was just too soon. But I do, have my questions, though, still about the personnel as a whole and about Quinn Snyder as a coach.
I think the Quinn Snyder stuff is at least worth bringing up, because I think ultimately when you see a performance like that Celtics game where they look so lifeless when they need a win, That always reflects poorly, at least on the level of buy-in. I thought the first possession of the game was the perfect example. Baylor Shireman hits like a no dip three in the left corner as Jaylen Brown comes off of like a
no dip threes are like the sexiest shot in basketball.
I know, right? I know, yeah.
It's such a good looking shot.
In a wonderful pass too, right in the pocket. Yes. And but on the shot, like Jaylen Brown beat low man help with a chest pass, which that should never happen because there should be enough ball pressure and enough like congestion. Like if you are putting two on the ball in pick and roll, like if you have a Kongu coming up to the level, he should never be able to make a chest pass to the corner. But that is literally the level of like lack of ball pressure that Atlanta was applying, which again, that should be such an intrinsic part of their identity in terms of the way they play on defense. And so I do think it's at least worth looking in the direction of the coach when a team doesn't appear bought into what they're trying to accomplish.
All right, let's talk Lakers, Jason. Lakers fans also seem to be incredibly unhappy right now with the team losing 5 of 7 games. They're currently the 6th seed, hanging on by a thread over the red-hot Phoenix Suns ahead of the play-in right now. What's wrong, Jason? Are Lakers fans overreacting here? Help us take the temperature of Lakers fans right now.
I think most Lakers fans that I talk basketball with on a regular basis have been out on this team for a while, simply because of the fact that if you look at their starting lineup, they do not have what they consider to be the future and or a reliable playoff player at the starting 5 because DeAndre Ayton has fallen off in a significant way in the last month and change, or at the 3. And so they're just too far away from being able to put together a championship level 5. And then as you start to dig deeper into the roster, there is such a huge deficit of athleticism and jump shooting talent that it's become almost impossible for them to overcome any sort of bad performance from their stars. Their stars have to be fantastic to win games because of that lack of shooting and athleticism talent down the roster. I've been trying to come up with a metaphor for like what it's like for this team without Austin Reeves. And to me, it's like Vegas with everyone drinking way less alcohol. And then you look into it, it's like, well, the alcohol makes the clubs better. The alcohol makes the gambling better. The alcohol makes the shows better. And like when no one's drinking as much, Vegas is suffering as a result. That's kind of what it's like with Austin. Like they need shooting. He's one of their best jump shooters. They need slashing, like guys who can penetrate the defense off the dribble. Austin's literally one of their very best players in that sense. He's one of their best, like overall, like connective playmakers. Yeah, I understand this is embarrassing to say, but he's one of their best defenders too. He's one of their best rebounders at the guard position. And so you take a little bit of Austin.
Says a lot,
yeah,
Jason.
It says a lot, I'm saying. But if you take a little bit of Austin out of every single phase of this Lakers team, they kind of drop below this like mandatory minimum in order to be able to compete. I think the loss of him has been huge. They're 25th in the NBA in catch and shoot 3-point percentage. And then the last thing I'd say, like there's a version of Luka when he's at his absolute best that is capable of carrying a mediocre to flawed roster to success. And Luka's just been below that level for the most part this season. His field goal percentage has not been able to come close to what he was in 2023 and 2024. His turnovers, he was below 4 turnovers a game in those 2 seasons. He's at 4.5 this season. He's starting to come around a little bit. He's been playing a little bit better in the last couple of weeks, but like with Luka operating below the level of a top tier superstar, with no Austin, with a 41-year-old LeBron James, it's just shining a giant spotlight on what is, in my opinion, a travesty of modern NBA roster construction. You need to have athleticism and shooting to succeed in the modern NBA, and Rob has somehow managed to get none of that around those guys over the last couple of years.
Is this just a bye year, as kind of hinted at ahead of the season by Pelinka, that they're thinking about 2027? Is that all this is, or is there any fixing this team?
I think that there is an outside shot if they really nail this deadline to at least kind of get into that second tier of contenders where, like, yeah, if things break right, you see them in the Western Conference Finals kind of thing. But I think championship is essentially out of the cards. And so essentially what you got to look at is if LeBron's 41 then you basically need a starting 3, a starting 4, and a starting 5 at some point in the next few years. I don't think Rui's good enough to be the starting 4. And so you have to begin the process of achieving those 3 starting spots for your long term alongside Luka. And so whatever deal gets you in that direction at this deadline, it's not even for this year's championship. You're starting to build a team that could potentially compete next year or the following year through incremental steps that can start this year. I have started to put my eye on the center position. And one of the big reasons for that is, even though I do think the Lakers desperately need perimeter athleticism, I just don't think Ayton's good enough. I think Jackson's fine as a backup center, but I don't think Ayton's good enough. And if you have a real foundational level center defensively, it makes more achievable perimeter roles. It unlocks the ability for them to run more traditional drop coverage looks that are functioning because you've got such a strong defensive foundation. So I actually think the Lakers should target the center position first and then kind of start to look towards the 3 and 4 after that. But ultimately, anything that can incrementally start to build for the future, they've got to consider at this deadline.
Who then, Jason? Who's the target at the center spot? Is that a target now? Is that a target this summer? But who's the name that you come down? Is there a dream name and a realistic name that makes sense for the Lakers?
I've been looking at a bunch of different directions. JJ Redick really likes to switch, so there's something about a Nick Claxton fit that I like, in the sense that Luka's kind of a bigger, stronger type of forward. In the short term, LeBron is bigger and stronger too, so that kind of anchors Nick being a little bit on the thinner side. He's not an elite rebounder at the center position, but he can defend in multiple different schemes pretty well and provides real rim protection, and he's a vertical spacing threat. So I wonder if you could put together a deal that gets you something like a Claxton and a Terrence Mann, and maybe you anchor a little bit of your perimeter athleticism at the same time in a deal like that. Again, I don't love the Terrence Mann contract, but at the same time, it's probably better than some of the things you've got going on your roster right now. There are a couple other options I've looked at around the league. I think anybody who could get Robert Williams for cheap would be smart to go on him. I don't think you can invest heavily in him with his health history, but I think you can look in that direction. And then the other kind of team that I secretly have my eye on, this is one for you, Kevin. What if Denver, in their pathway to have to pay Peyton Watson, decides to get off of Cam Johnson? Do you think there's like a move for the Lakers to jump in there to try to grab Cam as their starting 3, especially for a team that's really struggled to shoot the basketball? I think you'd have to convince Denver to help a rival, which is something that I don't think they'd be super thrilled to do. But if they were willing to take on the salary, the Lakers have expirings. And so that could be the pathway with which Denver could extend Peyton Watson, who's kind of looking like the small forward of the future for them.
Yeah, Peyton Watson's looking like a potential star, and Cam Johnson, solid, but looking replaceable for the Nuggets. So that is definitely probably more of a summer question for Denver than a question now. But I mean, everything you said, Jason, I agree with everything you said. Now, I think there's a segment of Lakers fans who are probably saying, you're not blaming LeBron James enough. And of course, the notorious LeBron hater on X, Apex Jones 22, posted a clip the other day of LeBron James cherry picking in transition. This is why LeBron is leading the league in fast break points. He said, notice every time 4 Lakers on defense because LeBron did not run back. As always, we point out the fraud, according to Apex Jones. Jason, I'm just curious about your reaction to this criticism of LeBron. Is it fair? Is it warranted or no?
So LeBron at this age, and it's kind of been lasting for like 3-4 years now, will have some of the most hilarious lowlights you will ever see, because he will straight up stop playing sometimes for like 2 or 3 possessions in a row. He had an example of like that the other night in the Hornets game, where you could tell he was gassed at the end of his first quarter shift. And so from like the 6-minute mark to the 4-minute mark, there were no stoppages or anything that could get LeBron out of the game. And so he just like stopped playing defense. And like you'll see some downsides like that, but talk to any Laker fan who's actually watching the Lakers on a daily basis, and they'll tell you that he's been one of their most valuable players over the last few weeks. The units that he's anchoring with Luka Doncic off the floor have been where the Lakers have been taking control of games. That was a big part of how they ended up beating Toronto as well. And so while there are a lot of lowlights in there, in the aggregate, LeBron's just been one of their most important players in every facet of the game.
I mean, I tend to agree with you here. I do think some of the criticism is fair of him. It's also just funny with
It's
Apex
absolutely
Jones.
funny.
He always finds something to go at LeBron for. It's so very funny following him on social media. All right, that's enough of unhappy fan bases, Jason. Where do you want to go next? Hot stove questions or random thoughts?
Let's go to random thoughts.
Okay, let's go to random thoughts. So we saw the Lakers face the Raptors on Sunday night. They beat Toronto. Colin Murray-Boyles had a sensational game. My random thought is Colin Murray-Boyles is the next Draymond Green. Murray-Boyles had a very good start in that game, defended Luka a handful of possessions, blocked him on 3 tries. On one of the possessions, he defended him man-to-man. Luka, it was on a switch. Luka on the left wing drove, hooked Murray-Boyles on the drive to the rim, and then Murray-Boyles recovered and blocked him. Luka was calling for a goaltend. A couple plays later, Murray-Boyles and help blocked him. Luka was complaining and whining like always. And then in transition, Murray-Boyles blocked his shot from behind on a little bit of a floater, and that's something Murray-Boyles does a lot of. He blocks shots and contests shots, grabs the ball in transition. He's been wreaking havoc as a guy hustling down the floor for the Raptors on defense, not just a half-court guy, but a transition stopper as well. And he's like Draymond on offense in some ways too, because he's 6'7", 6'8", can handle the ball, loves to kick it ahead, spark transition opportunities after steals or deflections and rebounds. And then in the half court, they use him out of the short roll a lot. It's a screener. He operates in the middle of the floor. He can score off the dribble, find cutters, kick it out, find shooters. He doesn't shoot at a high volume. He's shooting around 40% from 3 on about a shot per game. But the interior game, the playmaking game, the hustle, the effort on the boards as well. Murray-Boyles, there's been a lot of players over the years, Jason, that have been compared to Draymond Green. Most of it been very unfair for those other players. It's hard to reach Draymond. But to me, Murray-Boyles is the closest thing to enter the NBA that is deserving of the Draymond Green comparison.
I'm 100% with you on this. The best evidence I could give is that last night when I was watching this game and he hurt his thumb and had to leave early, I sighed in relief because that dude was a wrecking ball that was destroying the Lakers in like every facet of the game. I think that there's I think we've seen kind of several examples of this type of player that have been really impactful. I think Mojave Gay actually is an example in Atlanta as well, where it's like kind of this tweener 4-5 that runs the floor, just plays super hard. I think an underrated kind of like area of opportunity for any team is guys who play super hard at this time of year, because there's a lot of ground that can be made up with dudes who bring natural motor, but just bringing the combination of the athletic tools and constantly playing super hard and constantly being in the right position, it allows him to essentially just function as a wrecking ball in all these different facets. I thought you did a wonderful job breaking down some of the more refined like skill things that he brings to the table. But ultimately, like when you've got a dude who's got this level of athletic tools at his disposal, who's playing as hard as he's playing every minute he's on the floor, that has the foot speed element that you don't get from a Jakob Poeltl, like that, like ability to cover ground in transition or cover ground in rotation. I just think there's a ton of value in those kinds of guys in the modern NBA. We've seen this. It's just like that tweener forward that can guard multiple positions and that rebounds really hard and that runs the floor. There's just a ton of value in the modern NBA.
100%. And last year at South Carolina, as a sophomore, their defense was terrible when he was off the floor. It was one of the worst defenses in the nation, but there were 12 or 13 points per 100 possessions on defense when he was on the floor. And you're starting to see that happen with Toronto as well. I think the latest number is over the last couple of months, 7 or 8 points per 100 possessions better on defense with Murray-Boyles on the floor versus off the floor. So he's just one of those players where when he's on the floor, makes a significant impact, and hopefully he's able to develop his shot to a higher volume over time, because he's got the defense, he's got the feel, got the playmaking, got the interior finishing, just needs to figure out that perimeter game to really optimize who can be. My next random thought here, Celtics Pistons on Monday night is the game of the week. I am excited for this game. You know, you and I were talking before the podcast began about how there's been kind of a lull in the NBA schedule in recent weeks. This is a marquee matchup. 1 and 2 in the Eastern Conference, the 30-10 Pistons, the 26-15 Celtics. Did you see, Jason, video posted by Adam Himmelsbach on Monday morning? Jason Tatum going through a full one-on-one practice. Looked like he was at full strength, going at full speed. Tatum's coming back. It's going to happen. February or March, Tatum will return. It's going to happen. Assuming like he gets all checked out, Tatum's going to come back. And so there's going to be another real threat to the Pistons and the Knicks in the Eastern Conference that comes. But this matchup tonight, Boston, Detroit, I'm very excited for. And I think it's very important for the Pistons as well, Jason, because they get some tough matchups coming up ahead of the deadline. 2 games versus Denver. Jokic might be back for one of them. Game versus Boston, a couple other games versus top teams in each conference. Detroit's close, but I think this is going to be a really good barometer test for them against one of the most high-powered offenses in the league to show what's missing, what could be exposed in the postseason for us, what do we need to get better at ahead of the February 5th deadline. Are you feeling the same way about Detroit over the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think that Detroit has this incredibly strong foundation physically that I think bodes really well for them looking forward as a playoff team. Like when you're as good on the perimeter defensively as they are, when you're like one of their biggest margins, points in the paint, they dominate the paint on both ends of the floor because of what they do underneath the basket, offensive rebounding, and as cutters and rollers. They're plus 15 points per game every single game just in the paint. So they win so many of these margins that it kind of buys them a lot of margin for error with their half-court offense. And ultimately, that's going to be the big kind of like swing factor for them and their potential is right now they're a bottom half-court offense. So they're going to be able to get up to a level where they're able to go toe-to-toe with a team that slows down in the half court with them. But they've been good enough in crunch time, especially because of how good Cade has been. I mean, that's been the story in these Celtics matchups. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to tonight is they just have had these awesome crunch time battles. And the one Boston won, they got the stops on Cade, and the one the Pistons won, Cade's hitting crazy spin move jump shots in the lane over Derek White, right? So like that's kind of the showdown at the end of these games. But ultimately, that's what Detroit does. They drag you into the mud and they keep every game close. And so that's kind of why I've been so keyed in on like a Michael Porter Jr. for them or something that's a scoring, shooting upgrade at the 4 spot, essentially a better version of Tobias Harris, because this is a team that like if they went from a bottom half-court offense to like the 10th best half-court offense, now we're talking about a team that I think is every bit as good as the top-tier championship contenders in the league. And so I think it's worth it. I think that like if you really look at last year too, like they kind of physically manhandled New York a little bit in that first round series and gave them some real problems. There's a lot that they do that translates really well to the modern NBA in the postseason. And so I think that they're worth an investment on that level. And ultimately, I think they need a 4 anyway for the big picture alongside Cade. So I think they're my favorite Michael Porter Jr. team by far. There are a lot of teams that I think could use Mike, but they're my favorite team because I think it makes the league more interesting if the Pistons have that level of upside.
I'm 100% with you. I mean, they're 27th in the NBA in 3-point attempts per game, 18th in 3-point percentage. And if they can improve there, Tobias Harris is at 33% from 3. They have Oscar Thompson playing minutes and Ron Holland and iffy or non-shooters. That could become a problem in the postseason. I mean, they have very tradable salaries as well. They have Ivy at $10 million expiring as a restricted guy, Harris at $27 million expiring, LeVert with 2 years, $14 million annually remaining. They have young guys, Oscar Thompson, if they really wanted to put him out there, Ivy, Holland, Chaz Lanier, Marcus Sasser, Bobby Clinton. There's options, and they have all of their future picks. So they could do 4 firsts and 3 swaps. They can put stuff on the table and still have picks left over. I have 5 trade targets that I think Detroit should be angling for, Jason. I also have Michael Porter Jr. on there as well. Trey Murphy, I'd also put on the list as well. He'd probably be bit more pricey. He'd be awesome for them in that 4 spot. Jaren Jackson Jr. out of Memphis, if the Grizzlies did trade Ja and then wanted to also move Jaren Jackson Jr., have him as a 4, ultimate lineup flexibility, maybe even flirt with playing 3 bigs. Triple J, Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren. Imagine that team on defense with all that size. Io Dosunmu is like a cheaper option from the Bulls, slasher. He's become a 40% guy from three this year, a versatile defender. And then Klay Thompson quietly having a bounce back year
He's
for the
hooping right
Mavericks.
now.
Yeah, he's been playing great. And so you see Duncan Robinson, the way the Pistons use him off ball, off screens, as a screener on ball as well. Klay could do all those things. And so having another guy that adds that spacing threat, I think could be very, very important for Detroit come playoff time. And there's other guys. I mean, if Minnesota made a big trade, Naz Reid would probably be the guy that would have to go out. So Detroit expressed interest in Reid last summer before he re-signed in Minnesota. So maybe a guy like him, or, I'd make a call to Atlanta and say, hey, you guys are in the middle. Are you interested in trading Nickeil Alexander-Walker? I know you just got him. I'd make a call. I don't think they're going to pick up, but I'd make a call. Jeremy Grant, reunite with him as another lower end option. Doesn't move the needle quite as much. But those are the five: Murphy, Porter, Jackson, Dosunmu, Klay Thompson. That would move me the most if the Pistons were to make a transaction for one of them. I think they should, Jason. You remember that they traded for Rasheed Wallace in 2004. They were 34-22 when they got him at the deadline. They were the third in the Eastern Conference. They were a good team. Ben Wallace was on his way to winning his second Defensive Player of the Year. Tayshaun Prince, in year 2 of his career, was having a breakout season. Chauncey Billups and Rip Hamilton in that backcourt. They were a fun team, and they felt like contenders, but they didn't stay complacent that year. They traded for Rasheed Wallace. They traded Chucky Atkinson, a rotation player, and multiple picks to go get him because they weren't complacent. And I think this year's Pistons team is in a very similar spot, and they also can't be complacent with being at the top of the East. They should go out and make a move. They should be aggressive. It's open, Jason. You got to go for it. And Detroit is in a position with all their assets and picks and salaries. It is literally the perfect storm for making a big acquisition, and they have to go for it.
Yeah, I hate when people talk about assets too as if they disappear after you make a trade. If you make a smart trade, you're getting assets back. Like
yes.
if you go get a Trey Murphy, if you go get a Michael Porter Jr., and then suddenly like Giannis becomes available next year and you want him, Michael Porter Jr. or Trey Murphy can be the centerpiece of a Giannis trade, because then the
player
Bucks
might have more value at the time, Jason. He might have more value after he's with you.
Exactly. So like my thing is, as long as you don't go, do something. I've been talking about this with the Lakers with the respect to like if it Herb Jones popped up, or it, with juxtaposed with a guy like Andrew Wiggins. Like, yeah, whoever trades for Andrew Wiggins, there's a certain amount of like, if he's 32, he's not worth as much. And, maybe it becomes more complicated. But like when you get a really good player in their mid-20s, like they're worth that, whatever you pay for them, they're worth that in the next deal. And so to me, there's not really a whole lot for them to lose there. And then ultimately, I still think this conference is wide open enough to where a move like that could legitimately move them into the position of being a substantial favorite.
Absolutely, 100% true. And I think it's a similar thing for the Celtics. Tatum will return, assuming he gets, all the boxes checked by all the doctors come February or March. He will return. They also are in a position where I think adding one more big would make sense for them. Kate has been very, very good, but finding one more big man, I think, would make this roster feel a lot more complete. The issue with Boston is the fact that Anthony Simons has provided such a spark off the bench. He was the guy, it felt like he was by far the piece that you would trade. But Simons has been damn good, dude. He's streaky, but really good, and he can have those games that win you a playoff game. Sometimes he just straight up looks like Damian Lillard. It's just the way it is. Sometimes he looks like Dame, and so I'd be a little bit more hesitant to trade Simons than I would have been a few months ago if I were the Celtics. But this team, I've said it all year long, I think they're one of the best value bets to win the finals. Because they were like plus 5,000, plus 8,000 in some sports books earlier in the year. Just absurd odds for a team that could get Tatum back and Jaylen Brown playing at this level. Do you think I'm overrating Boston's probability of making a deep run?
No, I think Boston does enough things well that if you hit on a trade and you get Jason Tatum back, if you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference and how flawed everyone is, I think we'd be foolish to count them out. Like I think I'd probably have them third right now behind the Knicks and the Pistons. But I think that they're right up there with that group, and I think they're certainly capable. I think they just are a little physically overwhelmed at this point. So, for instance, like just in the Detroit matchup, Detroit has grabbed 43% of their own misses against the Celtics. Like when they face some of these bigger front lines, they're just completely overwhelmed on the defensive glass in a way that I think would be really difficult to hold up over the course of a playoff series. But Jason Tatum does help with that. And if you get a bigger bruising center, I actually want to turn this back to you because like I got into a debate with some Celtics fans on my show about like what kind of center the Celtics should be hunting for. Like if you could pick a big for the Celtics to trade for, who would it be at this point?
It would have been Zubats. I mean, that was always the name that came most to mind, even though Zubats has had a bit of a downish year for the Clippers. He was the one that stood out the most. I think reuniting with Robert Williams, Time Lord, would make some sense as well as a cheaper alternative for Boston. But I think Zubats is the one that's come most to mind. Do you have somebody that makes sense for them?
You know, I didn't love any of the options because of the trick that well you're mentioning with the salaries. Like, how are you going to pay this center for the long run? That's why I started to look at like some kind of like what if you traded for a guy like Vooch and then kept him at a big discount in the late phase of his career? You know what I mean? Like essentially like you bring him in and you re-sign him after this
Yeah.
for something that's like a 3-year, 3-year, $15 million deal, something like that, where like Vooch's late career, probably not going to get a bunch of money somewhere else anyway. He can run, pick and pop and space the floor. He anchors you on the defensive glass and gives you a post-up threat against switches. Like, I wonder if they have to look at flawed options specifically for the discount. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think similarly, it could be a guy like a Day'Ron Sharp from the Nets or a Nick Richards from the Suns, like somebody in that stratosphere. I think could make some sense. Last week on my podcast, I think it was Haberstroh or Sharp, I forget who said it. They mentioned Daniel Gafford, but that like speaks to the financial aspect. That's a little bit difficult for them as well. But these teams are close. Boston and Detroit are very close, and I hope to see these teams be aggressive when it goes forward. Speaking of trades, our final category is hot stove questions. So let's go with Ja Morant, who made his return on Sunday. He had 24 points and 13 assists in 28 minutes in a Grizzlies win in London against the Orlando Magic. Is Ja Morant's stock rising? Because you look at the numbers, Jason, the first 12 games of the season, Ja Morant was not getting to the basket. Only 18% of his shots came at the rim. He was settling for threes and mid-rangers. 51% of his shots came from mid-range. 31% of his shots came from three. His last 7 games, ever since he came back from his calf injury, 34% of his shots have come from the rim. Only 19% of his shots have come from three. He's scoring 28.1 points per 36 minutes on a 58% true shooting. That is very close to what he did in his 2 All-Star seasons combined, the 2022 and 2023 seasons, when he averaged 29.6 points per 36, took only 29% of his shots at the rim, took only 29% of his shots from three. Shot distribution and shot efficiency is looking very comparable. And forgetting about the stats, the eye test, when you look at the video, Ja just looks better. He looks more explosive. He looks more like the Ja Morant of the past. And so I'm not saying Ja is back to all-star Ja Morant. I'm not saying that. But have we seen enough to feel like Ja Morant's stock is at least risen to a point that other teams might go like, why not just roll the dice and take a risk on a buy low opportunity here?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the athleticism piece, because when I was watching him earlier this year, I'm like, doesn't even look like Ja athletically, let alone,
Oh no.
there's the obvious jump shooting criticism. Like, he goes 5 for 8 on jump shots last night. That has been the pivot point in his career. Instead of getting better at it every year, he's gotten worse at it every year. And that has been the thing that has prevented him from making that like next leap in his development. But when Ja's healthy, and I agree with you, I don't think he's looked quite like the early years in this recent stretch, but he is looking better in terms of his ability to get dribble penetration and get all the way to the basket. That is the foundational trait that has always made him so exciting, is he can beat anybody off the dribble, and he's got the short range shot making piece and playmaking piece to counter it. You can just pop up off the ground from 5 feet and hit a floater at a high percentage, and that gives him an over the top shot. It mattered more than the 3-point shot anyway. It just was, he could never stay healthy and athletic long enough to be that guy often enough for it to matter. My thing is, like, he's worth a risk for a team that can afford to take a risk. And this is why I keep looking at Miami and I go, this just makes sense to me. Like, Miami is a team that needs somebody that can provide more reliable dribble penetration. I know Ja didn't like this system in Memphis, but I thought Memphis played some of their best basketball when they were playing that system. So, like, I think Ja, as a guy who could initially break the defense with dribble penetration, makes a ton of sense in Miami and their system. I think the type of culture that Miami brings to the table could be good for Ja, just putting him around a bunch of, and for the record, Memphis deserves more credit. They're a very serious organization as well, but Miami at least can provide that and a change of scenery. So it can maybe signify some sort of like fresh kind of change in that sense. But like, the only teams that make sense for Ja are the teams that can afford to flame out with him. And Miami's going nowhere, so it makes some sense. I've even looked at Milwaukee too. Like, if you wanted to do something crazy to try to keep Giannis around, you could look in that direction, even though the fit with Giannis is just putrid, obviously. But like, it
Why
has
is
to
that,
be
Jason?
somebody that can take a risk.
Why is the fit so bad with Giannis, in your opinion?
I'm always concerned about a star pairing where both guys like to drive and neither guy likes to shoot. I think we saw that with the LeBron and Wade thing back in the early 2010s, even to a certain extent. Like, you just have to create so much space around them. Now, I think Milwaukee actually does shoot the ball reasonably well. The other thing too is, like, I think there's a little bit of like a Kevin Porter Jr. pounds the air out of the basketball thing that can slow down Milwaukee's offense, and I think Ja would do more of the same. I also really like Ryan Rollins, and I'd be really concerned about disrupting his development trajectory by bringing in a guy like Ja Morant. But ultimately, if you're trying to keep Giannis, it's that type of risk. But I have a hard time coming up with other teams, Kevin, that like legitimately make sense for Ja as a team that can afford to take the risk.
Yeah, it's a team like the Kings where it's like, screw it, why not?
Whatever.
26 years old. Well, we'll take a swing. We might miss. So what? Let's just try to get a star in our organization and see what happens. But I do think Miami is probably the team that would rank first of makes sense for situation with what their needs are. And plus, Spoelstra has run a bit more pick and rolls the last month or so, as Nekias Duncan outlined recently over on the dunker spot. So I think, Spoelstra is going to run a little bit of a hybrid system with their, no screens, the movement and the cutting, the Noah LaRoche offense, and with more traditional pick and roll. The one thing I will say about Miami is I have heard the Grizzlies don't want Tyler Hero, so it would have to be some type of other deal involving Miami. Or Hero would have to go to a third team, I would think. But we'll see. If Ja continues playing and continues having big games, I think you'll see more teams have interest. What's your thoughts on Ja after that game in London where he said, you know what I want? I'm loyal. I have a Grizzlies tattoo on my back. It really it doesn't jive with what we've heard otherwise, Jason, that Ja is open to being moved, that the Grizzlies and his interests are mutual. Do you think that we could be seeing just a young player changing emotions here, or is that just him just trying to save face with fans and say, I want to be here?
Yeah, I think it's the textbook example of like, no one actually thinks that it looks good to ask for a trade. Like, there's no version of this that looks good optically for Ja. So he's got to try to twist it in some way, shape, or form. I mean, the bottom line is, like, beyond, there have been attitude issues, there's been buy-in issues. Like there's a reason, like the Grizzlies play a certain way when Ja's not on the floor. Thomas LaSalle is trying to get them to play a certain way when Ja's off the floor. And like, I think just in general, the entire franchise culturally and philosophically in terms of the way they want to play basketball is shifting away from Ja. We all know it. He knows it. It's all just a game they're playing in terms of controlling the optics.
I think that's 100% true. I mean, almost everybody else in the Grizzlies plays fast with decision makings. Ja, for as speedy and as quick as he is, things slow down when he's on the floor and when he has the ball in his hands. And if he could only just lean into that quickness in a different type of way, maybe it could work. But ultimately, they do seem to be moving away from Ja Morant in that past era. Next up in our hot stove questions, do the Wolves actually need to make a trade? Now, this question's been on my mind, Jason, because I watched Anthony Edwards against the San Antonio Spurs look like Stephen Curry. Dropped 55 points, just hitting three-pointer, contested off the dribble, coming off a movement. He looked absolutely sensational, bringing the Wolves back into that game, even though they ended up losing it at the end against San Antonio. Now, the reason why this thought's on my mind is because with the Wolves, it's been a lot of questions. Do they need a point guard? Do they need another ball handler? Should they go for Ja Morant? The way Anthony Edwards is playing, I'm not quite certain that they need that. And the other question with Minnesota is about the big man spot, because they've been horrible defensively without Rudy Gobert out there. This season, they have a 107.2 defensive rating when Gobert is on the floor, a 118.4 defensive rating when he's off the floor. They also allow a bit more shots at the rim when Gobert is off the floor. But in that game, Jason, without Rudy Gobert, we saw Johan Berenger, their rookie center, get an opportunity. He had 3 blocks in the game, or 2 blocks in the game. One of them was more of a real shot alteration that didn't go. But he played 20 minutes for the second time in 3 games, made a case for more minutes, more consistent minutes, altered a ton of shots, even had a play versus Wemby where Wemby almost dunked on him. But Berenger was there. He made it a tough attempt for Victor Wembanyama. He always plays hard. He created an opportunity for the Wolves to get a shot on the other end of the floor, gave Minnesota the lead. I just think you look at the numbers, it's a very small sample with Berenger. 71 minutes where he's been in the only big on the floor. They have a 101.1 defensive rating. 43 minutes when Berenger has shared the floor with either Julius Randle or Naz Reid. They have a 100.1 defensive rating. With Gobert on the floor with either Randle or Naz Reid, which has been the far majority of their minutes this season, the Wolves have a 105.9 defensive rating. Dominant. With no Gobert or no Berenger, so the Naz Reid minutes, the Julius Randle minutes, or the minutes with both of them, the Wolves have a 123.3 defensive rating, which is horrible. They need to solve that in order to make a deep run in the playoffs. My thing is, what if the solve is just Johan Berenger getting minutes? And so this all comes back to the question, do the Wolves actually need to make a trade? What if the solutions are internal, Jason? What if it's just higher usage Ant because of the leap he's taken? What if it's just giving your rookie big man Johan Berenger more minutes? Are the solutions actually internal for Minnesota?
I think so. I am super high on Minnesota. I agree with you. I don't think they need to make a trade at all. I think they need to lean into continuity more than anything else. I will say the Randle Reid groups have defended a little better as of late, and they've had some good runs in some recent games where they've played really well. But Berenger, to me, is a very nice stopgap in the sense that whether it's a night like last night or 2 nights ago where Naz Reid hurts his shoulder and he's out, or Rudy Gobert's got a bruised hip, or to your point, like on a night where the Randle Reid groups just aren't defending and you need to go with a different look in the second half, I'm all for pushing his minutes more and seeing it, especially in the long run, if he can become a Gobert replacement ultimately as the years go by. He does all the things that you need in terms of there. Like, to me, there's like big man stuff that's like ceiling stuff, and then there's like floor stuff. And the ceiling stuff is like, can you shoot? Can you run 5-out offense as a passing fulcrum at the top of the key? Can you play one-on-one? Like, can you score in the post or like turn and face and ISO the way Jalen Duren does? Like, those are all like ceiling raising things. Like super switchy on the perimeter, that'd be a ceiling raising thing. But like for a floor for a center, it's like you got to run the floor really well, which Berenger does. You got to set good screens. He's clearly been learning from Rudy. He's been setting very good screens. You got to roll hard. And then you got to be able to run some sort of traditional drop coverage with size where you can bother guards coming downhill in the mid-range and bother guys at the rim. And I thought he bothered some jump shooters in that Spurs game too, with his length. And so I think ultimately he does all the things you need to have a high floor at the center position, which means he's absolutely capable of being a rotation level big right now. And so to your point, pushing it on nights when guys are out of the lineup and then using it as a counter when the Randall Reed groups don't play super well on the defensive end, I'm all for it. I'm super high on Minnesota though, Kevin. They will have these stretches like that second quarter against San Antonio where they just don't play defense. And that can be so maddening at times. But ultimately, this team can ratchet things up with their physicality at all their position groups and reach a level defensively while providing the rim protection with Gobert and then obviously a Berenger in certain groups that I think can really cause teams problems. And then they have, I think, a lot of aggregate offensive talent that's played together a long time now and has built some real continuity. Like Ant's awesome. Julius has been around for a year and a half. Naz Reid is awesome. Like when they won that game against the Thunder a few weeks back, and you're seeing like Naz Reid's posting up J-Dub, hitting the lefty hook off the glass and getting an offensive rebound put back, and Julius Randle's bullying post-ups and creating shots, and Ant's hitting shots, and like Dante DiVincenzo makes a big play here or there. Like they have what I think you need in order to beat the top teams in the league, which is big physical defensive personnel at every position with scheme versatility, and then a depth of big shot creators, and all of them can shoot. And that's why the improvements from like guys like Jaden McDaniels matter so much. Like, I think, yeah, it gets a little tricky when you get into their deep bench, but I think Jalen Clark is going to be fine for a guy that can play one shift per half when they get into the postseason. He's actually been a big part of why they've been better defensively as of late with Reed and Randall on the floor. They've just started putting him with those guys. Yes, it's like, be better at the point of attack, be better at the point of attack. You don't have to be as good.
And good helper too. He does it all.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So like, yeah, I'm huge on Minnesota. Like, by the way, I'm going to be having you on my show here in a couple of weeks to do contender rankings, and I can't wait to debate that with you. But I have Minnesota as a top tier contender. Like, I think they're legitimately every bit as good as the top teams in the league.
And I agree with you. I mean, I think they have all the pieces, and that's why, like with these teams at the top, sometimes you're just poking holes and figuring out, well, what could be the Achilles heel for us come postseason time. And I think the big man spot has been one of the questions with them. I think Berenger is going to play more, and we seem to both agree there. Point guard spot, I think it would be a mistake to go for Ja Morant. It's funny, like last week, I think it was during the episode I did with Andrew Sharp, I posted a fake trade about, hey, here's a fake trade for the Wolves to go get Ja Morant. And Wolves fans are like, you're an idiot. Like, you're a fool. It's like, I also don't think this is a good trade. I agree. This is like this is not clickbait. It's not rage bait. It was just, here's what a trade would look like.
Here's an option.
That's it. That's all it was. And me and Sharp had a nice, measured discussion about how it was a bad idea. He said it was the best version of a bad idea. I agreed. We thought it would be better to go for like a Scottie Pippen level point guard from Memphis, not Ja Morant, and all that. So anyway, I think that is the place where if Minnesota does make a trade, it's finding somebody better than Mike Conley. As much as I might love Mike Conley, he's awesome. I hope he's able to stay in Minnesota. I would love to see him win a championship. It would be awesome. That's the place they need to upgrade. Finding a guy who can be better defensively than he is, who provides more size and still maintain the shooting and connective playmaking that Conley still brings to the floor at his advanced age. I think if there's any trade to be made, that's the spot. It's upgrading over Conley, Jason. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I say don't make a trade, I mean like don't do anything big and aggressive that's super high risk. Like there's not a team in the league that shouldn't be looking for a marginal positional upgrade at a key rotation spot if it makes sense in terms of your asset expenditures, right? Like, yeah, like if that was Keon Ellis instead of Mike Conley, the Wolves are a better team. Like there's no point in like pretending like we can't, make those kinds of marginal
Keon Ellis. But that's a pretty good idea, Jason. Keon Ellis. I'm into that.
Well, it's to the point that you're making, like a guy who can guard a little bit, knock down an open three, drive a closeout. He can, just basic stuff at that position.
Yeah, I like that Keon Ellis idea, and obviously the assets are part of it. I'm sure the Wolves would love to find a taker for Rob Dillingham. To me, that's the salary, $6 million. If they can turn Dillingham into something, that's the place to trade him. Not Mike Conley. I want to keep Conley on the team for vibes, for energy, and have that veteran presence. But ultimately, I mean, like what we talked about with Detroit, the position that they're in, with Boston, it's really true with all these contenders. But with Minnesota, the fact Anthony Edwards continues ascending every single year and getting better. I mean, look, the Wolves lost that game, but like that was amazing. He looked like Stephen Curry. He looked like Steph with some of the shots he hit, Jason. It was unbelievable watching him just go lights out. You could see him when he was like, backpedaling back onto the defense after hitting so those shots, just like the look on his face. He knew he was feeling it. He knew he was on fire. It's like, this guy is amazing. And the Wolves need to find the right pieces around this guy to take advantage of the roster that they have, with Gobert still at a defensive player of the year level, Randall having an all-star caliber season, this depth, and Edwards emerging again, having another leap. This team's close, dude. They're really close.
This guy is the great hope, Kevin, for a fun to watch American star that is actually capable of going toe to toe with these other dudes from around the world. And like, I'll just be straightforward with you. Like when LeBron retires, he's going to be my favorite player. Like I like, not to take it to that crazy debate last week about whether or not people who work in the media can be fans. Like, I think we're all fans. Like, I think that's like, I think anytime you watch a player in any sport, you either watch him and you go, I like that guy, or you go, not my favorite. Like, it's usually what it's like. Mm-hmm. And like, to me, I watch Ant and I just absolutely love his game. I love his attitude. I love his demeanor. I just, the biggest thing with him as like a basketball nerd that I love is the combination of unbelievable, transcendently great shooting ability with transcendently great athleticism. When you look back through some of the great shooters in NBA history, like Clay had good size, but not an apex athlete. Steph had great quickness, but not great size or vertical athleticism. Ray Allen, towards the tail end of his career, when he was more of just a specialist three-point shooter, wasn't a terrific athlete at that point in time. We're watching what it would look like if like Michael Jordan and Klay Thompson like combined and formed into this like super basketball player. Like that's it just is unbelievable to watch, because I didn't even talk about footwork, which is how you actually get to your spots. You basically can't stop him from getting to a pull-up jump shot. You can't. So once he elevates, like, it's just a question of whether or not it goes in. And so that's why he can go on these crazy shot making runs where it's just like you're just there praying that he misses, and he's just not going to. It was his 7th 40-point game of the season. He had 9 all season last year. We have 39 games left, and he's got 7 40-point games already. Like, he's just an unbelievable player, Kevin. I think he's one of the great shows in the world right now, like where we have some stars at the top of the league, mainly Shea and Luka, who the half dozen times a game are driving directly into a defender's chest and throwing up a fake basketball shot to get to the foul line. Ant's playing like a very aesthetically pleasing brand of basketball. I just think he's one of the great shows on earth right now.
100%. And I'll tell you what, Jason, with the new All-Star Game tournament that they're having, with the 2 Team USA teams, Team World, and then the rookie sophomore winner, that USA team that has Ant on it, they're going to be the team that I think has a better chance, regardless of what the rest of the roster looks like, that has a better chance to take down Team Worlds, whatever team Ant is on, because he's going to go out there with an energy, trying to prove something. And that's what we need. That's why the NBA, I think, is in the right to go with this Team World versus USA rosters. The tournament aspect, we'll see how it goes. I look forward to being there for that. Are you going to LA for All-Star Weekend?
No, my company has not done All-Star related events before, but I think we're going to start. So hopefully in the next couple of years, I'll get out to an All-Star game, but I haven't actually been to one yet. Yeah,
I mean, it's a surprisingly long flight from Colorado to get to LA. Colorado's way out there.
Yeah, it's I noticed that too when I moved out here. I'm like, oh, we're like smack dab in the middle of the United States. It feels like in a lot of ways.
I don't know, for some reason,
I live on the Great Plains now, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. You really do. I mean, like growing up in Mass, I always imagined like Denver and like Colorado is West Coast. It's really not. It's in the middle
No,
of the country.
yeah.
It's,
And I moved
it's
here
beautiful.
for snow, and there's been no snow, Kevin.
Really? Are you serious?
It's the lowest snowpack in the history of the state. Dead
No
last.
way. Wow.
I'm dead serious. Yeah. And so
Wow.
I have 7 ski days in this year, but I was hoping to be more like 20. So it's been kind of disappointing, but
Wow.
we'll see.
So
Hopefully it gets better in the coming weeks.
Expectations. Huh. We just got out like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like 8 to 10 inches of snow last night in Massachusetts. It's beautiful outside. You know, when the snow first falls, that's when it looks just glorious, heavenly.
Oh
Is
my
what it
God.
looks like.
So we woke up to snow this morning, and it's been like probably the 4th time since we moved here that's happened. And that's been a really unusual thing for me growing up in Arizona. Like that just was not a thing that we dealt with. So like it's definitely been an interesting experience. You go to take the dogs on a walk and you're like, oh, okay, got to put my boots on. We'll get all dressed up for this.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. You have like certain pants.
Yeah.
It's like a snow outfit, and you got to shovel your
Now
way
the dogs
out
are going to make a mess. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you some dogs hate the snow, they don't want to go for their walks in the snow. They're unwilling to. So yeah, it's a whole thing with the snow. It's beautiful, but also disgusting in some ways. I'm sure part of you will be missing Arizona soon enough.
Oh, Arizona this time of year is so beautiful, but I'll be reaping the other side of that in the summertime. So.
Yes, exactly. 100%. Denver, beautiful place. Denver and Colorado in general would be on my list of places I'd consider living. Jason, thank you so much for joining me today, man. Please let people know where they could find all your stuff. I know you're doing more than just Hoops Tonight this season.
Yeah, so obviously Hoops Tonight on YouTube, and then wherever you get your podcasts. I'm most active on Twitter at @JasonLT. It's where I post, show announcements and stuff like that. And then I'm doing the All NBA pod with Adam Mares on Fridays. That one's been a lot of fun. I really like Adam, really enjoy working with him. And then Lakers Collective twice a week, just doing basically what I used to be doing before I was covering the league, just kind of focusing on the Lakers specifically with Jovan Buha and Trevor Lane. Those guys are awesome. We do some really fun shows over there. But Kevin, dude, it's always such a pleasure to see you. It was fun just shooting the shit and talking some guitar stuff before the recording too. And I am very excited to have you on the show here in a couple of weeks to do contender rankings. I always think it's fun to just kind of dive into like who's going to win the title. And I haven't gotten your take on that yet this year. So I'm really excited to do that.
Yes.
Too.
I'm very excited to go on your show, Jason. Thanks for joining me today. And thank you to everybody watching us live on YouTube. I'll be live again on Thursday with Tom Haberstroh. Looking forward to that with Tom. If you are still watching us live, please give us a like and subscribe to Yahoo Sports NBA. That's where you can find all of my podcasts, the video versions. That's where you'll find the Dunker Spot and the Big Number as well. And plus, we got some video breakdowns coming as well. We just hit 1K subs. Let's go for 2K. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.